Hello beauties, and welcome back to the Bumpy Bones Locksport channel. Now in this video I'm going to be showing you how you can make your own custom security pins for a variety of different locks. And this video is actually going to be the first video in a three-part video series. I recently got my green belt with the Lockpickers United belt system, and I'm looking at starting to go for my blue belt in that system. And a part of the requirements for the blue belt is to make your own challenge lock and to send it to another or to a fellow lock picker. And so I wanted to kind of document my journey in learning how to make my own challenge lock. And there are three parts to it. One is making custom security pins. The other is customizing the key pins that are in the cylinders. And then the other is customizing the cylinder itself. And what you can do is you can customize kind of the Bible. The Bible is where the pins reside, the security pins. And so I'm going to kind of do a three-part video making this Master Lock M530 into a challenge lock. Now, one reason why I'm using the Master Lock M530 to start with is I think this is a good learner lock for me to learn how to do this. The cylinder is a 4-pin cylinder. And so after I make my security pins, what I can do is I can easily pull this out and pin it up so that I can do progressive pinning. And that's where you only start with like 2 pins and you go with 3 pins and 4 pins. And to learn what I'm doing as I'm doing it. Now, if you do use the M530, there is a couple of things that you have to do to get the cylinder ready to make these modifications and to repin the security pins. One nice thing about the M530s is you can get these at Home Depot and they are fairly cost effective. And you can repin these, but you can't pull the cylinder out in order to replace the security pins. The way that Master Lock has these cores is that they crimp the end of it here to hold the cylinder in. And you can't easily uncrimp it or bend it out because it's a wide shelf that they got on here. And so what I had to do is I actually went to and cut away one of the crimps. And I did it, if you're looking at the back in here, I did it on the 3 o'clock side. And the reason why I did it on the 3 o'clock, and when you do that, you're going to actually have to grind it from like, say, the 1 o'clock to the 5 o'clock position, or 1:30 to 4:30 position. And the reason why I did that is when you have the core in the lock, you turn the key clockwise to unlock it. Now to pull the core out now, if you go counterclockwise 90 degrees, you can now just pull that core out and get to the security pins in that. So that's one thing that you have to do in order to get this core ready for the work that we're going to be doing with it. All right, so I'm going to put this off to the side right now. And let me talk about some things that you need in order to create your own security pin. Of course, the first thing you need are your brass rods. For like the Master Lock, American Lock, Pack, padlocks and all that, I find that a 2.4 millimeter brass rod works really well for those. If you're using like a doorway, so like a deadbolt or a door handle, 3 millimeter rods work well with them. And if you're actually really wanting to kind of take the Sparrow revolver lock and do something with this, because I love the Sparrow revolver lock, you've got 4 different sides here that you can do stuff with. But one thing I've learned about the Sparrow's revolver lock is that the hole width is actually bigger than you would find in a standard doorway key. And so if you're doing pins for this, you want 3.2 millimeter rods for that. So just one interesting thing that I did learn about the Sparrow's revolver lock. All right, so once you have the material, what you will need are your tools. Now, I use my Dremel here as a lathe, and I actually have the drill press stand for the Dremel, which is really nice because you can rotate the mounting 90 degrees and have this available to use it as a lathe, which is really cool. If you don't have the stand, you can put your Dremel into a vise. I've done that in the past, and that's worked really well. And you don't need the big Dremels in order to do this. You can utilize like the smaller handheld ones that are a little bit cheaper. But I like using the bigger ones because they do have a little bit more horsepower behind them, and that does come in handy, especially when you're trying to take the files and grind in the grooves and all of that. Another thing you'll need is a really good caliper. And this is what I will use to measure the height of my pens and to make sure that I keep kind of consistency with them and I don't go too large with them. And that will cause issues if you make them too long. And then a couple of other things that come in really handy is sandpaper. I have sandpaper here that goes from like 80 grit to 3000 grit. And the finer the sandpaper, the more polishing you get. The coarser the sandpaper, the more shaping you can do. So I always recommend having a good variety of grits with your sandpaper. And then the other thing that you'll want are an assortment of files. And this is what we'll use to shape the pens itself. Another thing that is very handy to have is a jeweler's saw. Now you can use a hacksaw, and I've got one right here. But the difference between these two is the hacksaw blade is much wider than the jeweler's blade. And so you can do more fine work with a jeweler's blade than you can with a hacksaw blade. So I recommend getting one of these. These are, fairly cheap on Amazon. I got the artistic wire one here and it works really well. And also have replacement blades on hand because these do break and do get dull quickly. So having a couple of extra blades on hand is really good. And then just some other niceties to have is a good pair of wire cutters or bolt cutters, and that's what we'll use to cut this down so we can get that into our Dremel. And having a pair of pliers or a multi-tool next to you is really good because you can use that to tighten the head of the Dremel to make sure that it doesn't slide around. And then with the Dremel, the other thing that I have with the Dremel is the bit that I can actually tighten and loosen by hand. It just makes it a lot easier because I don't have to work with any wrenches. So what we're going to be doing is I'm going to be taking this rod here and I'm going to be making 4 security pins in this video. Now, for master lock and padlocks, you do really have to keep track of the height of your pins. And one thing that I learned, this is actually the third time I'm remaking this video, because in the previous video I used 5.5 millimeters as the height of my pen, and it worked really well when I was putting it in my American lock keyways. But when I put it in this keyway with the Master Lock M530, I couldn't put the key in as the pins were too big. If you make the pins too big, you don't leave enough room to compress the spring in the Bible here, and you can't insert the key. And what you'll notice is that with the American locks, and also pack locks, is that you have more space in those than you do with the Master Lock. And just to kind of show a comparison, this is one of the Master Lock Pro cylinders I got from Covert Instrument. So you can see these are similar in size, but when I hold it up to the American Lock cylinder I got, you can see there's a difference with that. So you really want to keep track of the height of your pen. And so what I did was I went through and I just quickly cut some standard pens at a 5 millimeter height and put them in this cylinder here, and they worked just fine. So I'm going to be making my pens with a 5 millimeter height, but you really just want to keep an eye on your bidding and all of that, because what happened is, this is the key for this lock, and you can see at the number 4 key pin position here, that's a really high pin, or not high pin, but it's a low number pin, but it's a high cut. And so you need actually, sorry, scratch that and reverse it. You can see you have some really low cuts here, and so those are longer key pins with those. And so when you go to insert it, because the 4th key is so high, you need a lot more space in order to raise up these pins in order to get by them, so you can insert the key. And so if you're working with a key or a bidding that's relatively the same, you don't really need to keep track of it that much. But when you have a high-low profile, you need to be more aware of your pin, the height of your pins and all that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with making our first pin. So what I'm going to do is, let's go ahead and cut a section of rod here. I can't use the full section here, because if I go to insert in, it just is way too long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut, just, a couple of inches here. All right, and that's all I need the wire cutters for. And I'm going to put this in here. Yep, that's a good height. And let's go ahead and tighten it. Now, this is a new rod that I'm working with, and you can see that the end of it here is not totally flat, and it's got some lip to it. So I'm going to cut off the end here real quick and make sure that it's nice and flat, and then I'll cut my first pin. Now you'll notice that just moved on me, so I need to tighten that a bit more, and I want to use my pliers here just to make sure we're nice and tight. All right, so we got that pulled off. We can throw that in the garbage. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to make sure that I don't have any little bumps with that, because I don't cut all the way through the rod, and that's because when you do that, the pin's going to drop, it's spinning, and it runs the risk of it kind of going off into oblivion. So I always make sure that I pull it off, and then I just gotta grind down that end so that any little bump in the middle there gets filed off. And then I always do that real quick, and that just removes any curling that's happened due to cutting in that. All right, so now the other thing I would recommend is, if you use like a stand like this for your Jamel, always take some clamps and clamp it down, because I am on my bench that I am doing my recording on. I don't have any clamps long enough in order to get into this area here, so I got to kind of hold this, which is going to kind of affect some of the work I'm going to do here. But that's always one thing that I always recommend doing, is get some clamps and make sure that this doesn't move. All right, so let's go ahead and loosen this. I'm going to pull this out just a little bit here. All right, so I'm going to tighten that, and I'm just going to hit that real quick with some sandpaper just to make sure that it's nice and flat, because I think I still see a bit of a knob. All right, that's better. All right, so let's go ahead and make our mark. The other thing that you would definitely want to have is a carbine scribe. And the reason why you want this is when you are measuring your pin height, this can make a little mark on the rod so that you can make sure that your pin heights are exactly what you want and all that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tighten this up. Just so that that doesn't move around on me. And the other thing that I recommend having is a block, especially if you have this raised up a bit. And that just kind of helps keep things where you can rest it and ensure that you kind of get the height that you need with everything. Oh. And what you'll see is with the caliper here, I already have this set for 5mm, and so the space that's in between the sides on this side, that's exactly 5mm, and that's what I'm going to use to make sure that I'm around that height. So I'm going to go through and make my mark. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut a little groove in here. All right, and what that does, that gives me a visual representation of my pin height. And so I'm just going to make that a little bit deeper. All right, but you don't want to make it too deep because you don't want this bending as you're cutting or using the files and all that. So, all right, so let's go ahead and do a little planning here. Now, the one thing I'm going to definitely say is that you'll plan out your pins, but sometimes those plans don't work too well, and that's okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to do a serration here, and then I want to kind of do a use one of the triangular files to do a nice sharp groove here. And what that will do is that will kind of give me the something like a serrated spool or a serrated mushroom, and that will kind of be a little bit fun. So let's go ahead and cut this out. All right, so I got my serration there. This is getting a little bit dull, so I'm going to pause my video real quick and replace the blade on this. All right, so I got the blade replaced. It was a bit of a fun process. One thing that I do is I make sure that, you know, with the blades, you do have this flat side and then the slope. I've got the slope facing towards me, and that's because when I cut, when I push it, that's what's going to be doing the cutting. And what you'll see me do sometimes when I'm working on these is you'll see me kind of slowly bring the blade back towards me. That's giving me a groove so that I can actually do the sawing in. As you saw before, this was kind of jumping all over the place, which was a sign that the blade was getting dull. And with a new blade, you should see that being minimized now. So let me go ahead and continue this. Oh yeah, nicer. All right, So I'm going to go ahead and do a groove here, trying to get it in the middle. All right, and what that will do is that will give me the a nice little groove there that I can put in on the edge of the file and make sure that I keep this nice and straight. Now I'm using a square file here, and the reason I'm using the square file is it has a bit more of a pronounced angle to it. So let's go ahead and see how this comes out. Ooh, that came out nice. All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some of my sandpaper, and I'm not going to do any of the bigger grits. I'm going to start with a 1500 and then work down to 3000. And let's see here. There's 3000. That's just going to kind of polish it up and keep things a little bit consistent. All right, so let's cut this off now because that's looking nice. Actually, before I cut it, I'm going to just do another pass with the groove here. It feels all right, but I just want to make sure that I got a nice groove orchestration there. All right, there we go. That's looking better. All right, let's cut it off. All right, so there's our first pin. And let's go ahead and actually, let me grab some pinning tweezers because that will help down the road. All right. You'll notice also I have a sheet of paper here to catch the filings. I actually reuse the brass filings I get from this. So I do woodworking. I throw those in some resin, which has a nice effect. So let's go ahead and just make sure we're nice and flat here. All right, and let's see here. Do I have 5mm? Yep, I can work with that. All right. All right, it moved a bit on me, but we're still good. All right, so with this one, actually what I'm thinking about doing is taking my hacksaw here. And let's do 2 grooves here with this one. I'm going to try to do it without doing any grooves, and let's see how this comes out. All right. I'm going to abandon that because it's really hard to control without clamping this down. So plan B, what we're going to do is I'm going to do a serration towards the top of the pen, and then I'm going to use one of the round files I've got and do a little bit of a rounded groove towards the bottom. All right, that's looking nice. All right, let's clean it up a little bit. All right, that's looking nice. All right, so let's go ahead and cut this off now. All right, and kind of how I know that we're close to cutting that off is I get a lot more resistance on that. And you can actually kind of hear the sawing change. So that came out to be a nice one. All right, let's flatten out the end here, move the rod down, cut another one. All right, that came good. So let's go ahead and loosen this up. All right. So let's go ahead and measure out my 5 millimeters. All right, so this one I'm going to make a bit more fun. All right. I want to shape both ends of this a bit. What I'm going to do before I cut it is I'm going to take the square file that I have and do a nice groove there, kind of give it an edge. I'm going to round this side a bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm also going to put some serrations in it. So let's cut the serrations first. Making sure that my blade's nice and tight. All right, got some nice crazy serrations there. So let's shape the end here. And actually, I might change this up a bit because that is some crazy serrations. You know what? I like that just the way it is. Yeah, let's keep this one. The next one, I'll do a bit of a shape on it. So let's go ahead and I think I can get one more serration in here. All right, let's cut this off. All right. So as you can see, I hope this is coming across on the video. That is some crazy serrations on that one. All right, let's cut one more. Alright, I know I might have to move this to get myself some more room. Alright, so let's measure. Alright, so this one, I'm not going to do as many serrations on. I'm going to try to do what I was going to do with the last pen. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3. I'm going to try to do 4 serrations. And then I'm going to do some shaping with the serrations. And that should, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a nice groove on the inside here. Kind of like I did with the second one, but I'm going to do serrations in with it. I think that will add a nice little funky feedback to it. Alright, I only got the 3 serrations in, but what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use this bigger file now to do the curve, because I want to get that curve in the serrations a bit. I might need to deepen the serrations. I might check as I am filing, just to make sure I'm not filing out the serrations. Alright, I don't want to go a little too much further, or what's happening at the top here is I'm losing the width at the top, which could be a little interesting, but I want to make sure I have enough of a width to keep the spring. So actually what I might do is reverse this one a bit. See how it comes out. All right. Let's cut that and see what we got. All right, I think we're safe. But I'm going to keep the bump at the top of that just to give the spring something set in. But that came out pretty cool. I'm going to make one more just to be on the safe side. I'm going to use the smaller file with that one. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and size it. All right, so I got my mark here. Let's, you know what, let me grab my triangular. Yeah, here we go. Here's a triangular one. I'm going to do a groove here and a groove there. I'm going to make them deep with the triangular and go with that route. All right, so I think I got enough space. I'm going to do a serration on both sides. Ooh, that came out nice. All right, so let's go ahead and take some sandpaper here and clean this up just a little bit. There's my 2000. All right, that's looking nice. All right, let's cut it off. And then we just got a couple of little things to do to clean them up. There we go. All right, so I can put my files away. Well, most of the files. I still want the flat one, which is right here. And I want my sandpaper still, but I don't need the saw anymore. All right, so let's go ahead and take out the remaining rod. And what we're going to do now is just polish up the ends of these. So if you take a look at, say, like this one here, I'm not sure if it comes out on the video, but there's a knob at the top there. I want to grind that off and polish that off a bit. And this is where it gets a little funky, just because now you got some good precision work that you want to be doing in terms of getting this in place and giving you enough room to work on the end. So I only hand tighten this one. I don't do the my pliers on it to tighten up, because you don't need that for this part. All right, so there's one. And that looks really nice. Now, sometimes I'll keep the knob or that little bump on it, and that's on pens that I want to make sure that I have a defined top or bottom. But I do want to keep it on some. All right, so there's two. Let's do this one. Now I am going to keep it on this one. And the reason being is the serrations at that end are really kind of thin. So come on. I pushed it too far in there, and that does not want to come out now. Oh, there it is. So it did come out. All right. And that's why I always also recommend maybe making one or two more when you're doing this, is because it does have a chance of dropping, and especially if you're working on carpeted floors like I am, you're probably not going to find it. All right, so this one, it's going to be a bit fun to get in here. I'm not sure if I can do this one or not because of the groove I did. Yeah, it's not going to come out, so I'm going to do this one by hand. All right. I wanted to keep the nub on this anyway, so I'm not going to really polish that end up. All right, we'll keep that one there because I can't get that into the... All right, and now we got this one. And I'm going to grind the bump off of this one completely. And there we go. So let me get my pinning block here. All right, and there we go. We got now our own custom security pins. And so what I'm going to do in the next video is we will work with the key pins, and then we will work with the cylinder in the third video, and we'll continue to make our challenge lock. So I hope everybody enjoyed this video. Feel free to like and comment on the video, and everyone have a beautiful day.